known, but not until the disastrous end of empire could they really rise to their full potentialities. Even though each chapter has its dominant topic, I organized Weimar culture chronologically so that the listener could easily recognize the intimate ties between culture and politics at every point. The text should offer few difficulties, but its republication is a good opportunity to address some issues raised by reviewers. The Weimar Republic, though it gave Jews unprecedented prominence across a wide scope, was not a Jewish republic, as its enemies have so often proclaimed it to be. It would not have been worse if it had been, but Jews taking a significant part in German culture were wholly assimilated. They were Germans. Ernst Cassirer's work on Kant was not a Jewish Kant. Bruno Walter's Beethoven was not a Jewish Beethoven. It was precisely the largely untroubled cooperation of Jews and Gentiles in their common pursuit of modernism that made the Weimar Republic so remarkable a phenomenon. The mere mention of some of its icons makes that plain. If the drafter of its constitution, Hugo Preuss, was a Jew, Walter Gropius, the architect, Bertolt Brecht, the playwright, Paul Tillich, the theologian, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, the painter, Marlene Dietrich, the actress, were all Gentiles. For rational listeners, this was not a difficult topic to dispose of, but the psychoanalytic titles I gave several chapters in this book raised a harder question. They are not casual, not mere window dressing. When I wrote Weimar Culture, I was still years away from the psychoanalytic training I would undergo in New Haven, but I was already persuaded that historians could find Freud's ideas useful. When I spoke of the trauma of birth, the revolt of the sons, and the revenge of the fathers, I had no intention of treating a historical period as though it were literally an individual being born, living, and dying. These descriptions were analogies, but analogies that were more than verbal. They called attention to a widespread psychological situation in Germany between 1918 and 1933. The creation of modern states, whether the United States, a united Italy, or Bismarck's empire, and the Weimar Republic, all followed upheavals that made their origins possible and difficult at the same time. But the other states I have listed were all fruits of victory. The Weimar Republic, for its part, was the offspring of, and had to cope with, abject defeat. Certainly one important cause of the Republic's end was precisely that its beginning had been so traumatic and that it was from the outset surrounded by adversaries who only wanted to do away with it. To speak of the revolt of the sons and the revenge of the fathers is to restate the point of my subtitle. The outsiders were, on the whole, people energized by a youthful desire to discard time-honored ideas and institutions. The fathers who revenged themselves on their rebellious brood were ideologues who mourned the lost traditions and a lost empire. The point I wanted to make was that emotional commitments to the new and the old, whether rational or fanatical, were not merely masks for economic interests, but profoundly felt ideals and regrets. It was emblematic for this psychological combat that the last president of the Weimar Republic should have been an aged general from the First World War. My chapter, The Hunger for Wholeness, is another attempt to dig down to the emotional roots of politics in the Republic. The idea that modern humanity has been torn apart by the division of labor and specialization, a sad decline from the wholeness of the ancient Greeks, had been familiar long before Weimar's cultural pessimists took it up. Friedrich Schiller, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, the German Romantics, Karl Marx, all had employed scathing generalizations like disintegration, alienation, and other terrifying terms to characterize their society. The age of the multi-talented Renaissance man was over. Eternally chained to a single small fragment of the whole, Schiller wrote, man, he meant his contemporaries, forms himself only as a fragment. As I point out in the text in considerable detail, the emotional need to overcome this fragmentation was a significant element in the way many Germans, whether idealistic members of the youth movement or cloistered philosophers, saw their culture and despaired over it.